Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Josh Fulmer. Josh is a lead technical recruiter over at Dragos. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here, Pete.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. You seem to have more connections on LinkedIn than basically anybody I know, so it's a pleasure to have you on here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Yeah, of course. So I've been a technical recruiter for 8 years. I've done everything corporate you could imagine, from IT to cyber to engineering. Right now, I'm the lead recruiter for cybersecurity recruiting at Dragos. So Dragos is a startup company working in the industrial cybersecurity space. So more simply put, we protect industrial assets, electric grid, oil and gas, from cyber attack. So pretty cool work, pretty unique. And I've been there for just about 2 years. And then I'm just very active in the community, love posting content about job searching, recruiting, all that stuff, cybersecurity. And it's been fun to get to know people and be part of that community. So
yeah, and you're certainly in a really interesting niche, that's for sure. I imagine you run across some pretty interesting positions. What type of roles do you generally recruit for?
So we have a pretty small team at Dragos. So, I span, right now I'm pretty focused on sales. So, but I love technical roles. So in the past couple of years, I've been focused on cyber threat intelligence roles, like security research, threat hunting, as well as our consulting teams. So building out pen testing teams, incident response, other industrial security consultant type programs. And so that's what I love doing. No offense to any other business departments or positions, but I love talking to people that are very close to technology, close to the threats that we face. And so I'd say those are the most common positions I'm running into now.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I discovered pretty early on in my recruiting career that the technical terms just seemed to kind of make sense to me, and I was able to understand technology on a level that a lot of recruiters kind of struggle with in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think everybody's necessarily built that way. What would you attribute your success as a technical recruiter to? Like, do you think it's something innate, or do you think it's just a lot of research and practice?
I'd say the latter. I'm not like a really good analyst, or I'm not a super sharp technical person myself. Although I think the one thing that has always been an advantage is it's been really interesting to me. So I think if you love something, if it's interesting to you, it's just easier to talk about. You naturally do more research on it. And so, I wasn't always in cyber, but once I jumped into more cyber or, cyber related engineering or technical positions and programs, I just loved it. Love the whole community there as well, and the people that are involved. But yeah, the other thing I think that's made me successful, if anything, is just being humble and always learning. So I ask a lot of questions. I meet with a lot of people on the team, not just hiring managers, but I often reach out for coffee chats and conversations with technical people at Dragos and at former companies, where, hey, just simple as, tell me about your job. What are you working on? What do you do day to day? What are some of some of the tools you use? So actually hearing about, what the frontline people are doing is actually very helpful with me, just for learning purposes, but also to communicate with candidates. It's almost like I'm speaking their language because I'm learning it every day. So.
Yeah, and I think people really appreciate that too, especially when I think in general there's a glut of undertrained recruiters or folks that aren't as passionate about the field they're recruiting in, or maybe they're generalists and so they can't develop deep expertise in any given area. It's interesting you mentioned sort of you have like a passion and an interest in the security world. It parallels, I think, closely what hiring managers often say they're looking for in analysts and technical people. For people that always want to learn, and they're constantly out there absorbing information, and they genuinely care about the field. It interests them. It's not just about the money or whatever else. that I think a lot of boot camps and stuff are promising these days. But maybe we'll get there at some point in the conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great background, and it's great to hear somebody else so passionate. I hear you
Yeah.
talk, and you remind me a lot of Joe Hudson. I think you, me, and him are all kind of similar in the fact that we really do care about the field. We find it very interesting and stuff like that. I think that knowledge absorption and interest in the field really differentiates the really good recruiters from the just okay
For sure.
recruiters. So, I think for any hiring teams out there, try and get you a recruiter who has a genuine interest in the field that they're recruiting for. And I think you'll generally get better results that way. So obviously, we talk a lot about the talent gap on the show. In cybersecurity, some people say it exists, some people say it doesn't. Some people say it's inflated, some people say it isn't. It's underquoted. What would you say? Is the talent gap a real thing? And if so, what does it look like in your mind?
It's a hot topic, and it's a great question. Like, I think everyone has a different opinion on this. For me, I'd say yes and no. It depends on the organization. I think for some companies, they artificially create the gap because they're not willing to invest in career development and training and bringing up talent that may not be at the senior level, things of that nature. Other companies just can't afford to hire. And I think Dragos has been in that position before where, it'd be great to build out these, more entry level programs or co-ops or internships, which we've done a little bit in the past, but it's a startup. We're scaling fast. Most of the time it's such a small team that most of the time we need people with experience. And that's just kind of how the business wheel turns, right? I mean, you have to deliver. But I'd say it's we almost create the problem by talking about it so much. And culture is a big thing in cybersecurity, and it's a unique culture in many ways. And we say things like break into cyber, break into tech, as if there's some fortress that you have to, kick a big gate down and to get in, where it should just be a wide open door. So I think there's some kind of cultural issues happening where we just, don't accept people with certain backgrounds or certain things like that. So there's definitely bias and different cultural issues happening. But no, I don't think there's a serious gap. I think companies inflate that. And when they say, we could talk all day about, why a company's struggling to hire. I think a lot of that can be solved by being more open-minded about the type of people they hire and opening it up more to a more diverse audience of people. Because there's a ton of people and a ton of talented people ready to come in and, work hard, prove themselves, learn. We just have to be willing to hire those people. So yeah, those are some initial thoughts. I don't know what you're seeing out there though.
Yeah, it's like I always say, I don't think there's really any gap at the entry level. There are shortages of certain skill sets relative to demand. So like DevSecOps, AppSec, that sort of thing, highly specialized roles. Sometimes you'll see shortages. Yeah. I think there's enough bodies. That's not really the question, especially in this economy. Stefan Waldenvogel publishes data on this on LinkedIn all the time. He's been tracking data of LinkedIn jobs for the last couple of years. And he basically just does a single search term for jobs on LinkedIn cybersecurity. And then he's tracked those data points over the last couple of years. And we hit an all-time low as of September 5th of 15,000 jobs with that term as the search term. So, and if I generally I ballpark the number of, tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people trying to break into the industry right now. So, I mean, we would literally have every job in the industry filled if we were able to consider all the junior people that are trying to get in. And I think
another thing is, like, again, back to culture. I'm not like a CEO by any means, of course, but you go on like Reddit forums or cybersecurity forums or any platform where cybersecurity people are talking, either anonymously or not. And security teams are under-resourced. They're super strapped. There's one woman or two man teams that are doing like everything. you could possibly imagine for a security kind of program or security team. And I think historically, executives are not super excited about filling like a CISO role. It's not like it's just a weird culture there, right? Where we need cyber people when we need them. But other than that, it's not always top of mind about like doubling down and investing. And we saw it this year, like security teams were decimated with the layoffs. And that means people are now having to pick up the slack that stayed at those companies, and they're being stretched even more thin. So I don't know if that's like a direct parallel to like the talent gap discussion, but I think in many ways, that just creates more of a problem. And I hear about it all the time where they're just not well resourced. They don't have what the support they need to be successful. And they're being asked to do way more than I think is what's expected of most people. So depends. Some companies do it well, some others don't. But there's some pain out there, and I think it's related.
Yeah, I think that the deeper issue that kind of trickles down to everybody, you mentioned everybody being kind of overutilized and overworked and, budgets squished and stuff like that, especially in this economy. I think the issue starts with the fact that security doesn't necessarily have a seat at the board table. There's a sense that we'll take on whatever risk because it's a future unknown if and when we'll get breached. So we're just going to kind of take that risk and hope for the best. We don't want to spend the extra money on security. So I've been thinking about that a lot recently. It's like, how can you build a business case to get the resources that you need for your security team, whether that's more staff, better tooling, whatever the case may be. I think a lot of problems can be solved by process and documentation, streamlining things that way. But at the end of the day, you still need people to do the work. And, if companies are cutting budgets and there's not enough budget to hire people and everybody's already overworked, what do you do? So I think we're seeing a lot of turnover in this type of environment. Yet there's also this idea, well, there's not as many jobs out there, so I really have to hang on to this job that I don't necessarily feel that I have good work-life balance in, just because
gotta have it.
Gotta have it. What happens if I get laid off or I can't find another job? So people are sticking out in subpar situations. We'll see if that changes with if and when the economy turns around. We'll see. Some would say that we're not as bad off as some others would say. I would say the hiring freezes and all the uncertainty out there is pretty proof positive that there's some not so great things happening with the economy. But that's, I suppose, another discussion. Obviously, you've advised hiring managers over the years, and you've hired for a lot of different positions. Are there any recurring challenges or issues that you've seen in hiring security people over the years?
Yeah, always. There's always a challenge, and it depends on like where the market's at. For example, when the market was booming, this is 18 months to 2 years ago, it was very difficult to attract and hire talent across, engineering or cyber positions because there was an abundance of jobs. There was an abundance of market capital and investment happening. And so that was a, candidate driven market where we had challenges. And so that at that point in time, my strategy, if you just even like looked at like all my LinkedIn content, if you could look at like a historical graph of what I talk about, back then it was very heavily involved with pushing Drago's culture and Drago's tech and Drago's benefits and highlighting all the good things about the company, because I wanted that to be an advantage, right? Where we weren't competing in some areas, like people just loved the work we did, the industry we were in, and the culture. And so I was posting a ton about that as well. And now where, it's flip-flop the other way, the coin is flipped. It's now an employer-driven market. We have kind of the pick of the litter, if you will. There's a flood of candidates in the marketplace. So now the challenge is, with all that volume, just helping managers, have a really good process and system and criteria in place, because they're doing more interviews, they're getting more referrals, they're getting more attention from candidates. And so it's helping them just stay really organized. And again, back to like, what is it exactly that you want and you need in these positions, and then, making the right choice. So I've kind of been down both roads. But I would say another challenge in general with every hiring manager is trying to get past their bias, trying to get past, help them have an open mind. Like everyone, no matter if it's subconscious or consciously, we just have an idea in our head, like who we want to hire. So if I say, Pete, we need to hire a nurse for our team, who do you think of? Probably a female. It's like it's just how we're hardwired. It's like, that's a female job. But there's a ton of male nurses out there, and a ton of different types of nurses, and all these other things to think about. And that's like a silly gender example, but you get my point. Like everyone has in their head, again, either subconsciously or consciously, who they think is going to be a good fit. They have these skills, they have this background, they used to work here. And if they have something similar, as far as like something relevant to our work history, that comes into play as well, or a similar background. So really, it's just trying to, as we bump into really talented candidates that may be lacking some things, but be strong in other areas, or bring some diversity or some different kind of flavor to the team. It's just trying to influence managers to have an open mind and to say, hey, you're going to have to give a little here to get a little over here. And that is a very gray kind of ongoing conversation. But that's always going to be a challenge, is helping managers overcome just some of the roadblocks in their head about who they want to hire. So, because there's lots of good people out there, and every manager is different, so you just kind of have to adapt. But that's some things I've been seeing.
Yeah, well. And I can echo that on the external recruiting front, much the same. I think the most common bias for me is like me bias, and that manifests in a bunch of different ways. So the hiring manager basically wants to hire a carbon copy of him or herself, whether it's the common one for me, because I work with a lot of consulting firms, is we want Big Four experience. They have to have worked at a large consulting firm.
A certain company.
But that pedigree, as they say. And I always advocate for the folks that have worked at the smaller firms, because I worked at a smaller firm. So I understand, along with the smaller firm, you have less mature processes. You probably have more clients you're juggling at any given time. You have to wear more hats. You're doing more at once, usually for a smaller company. So sometimes, despite how well we articulate, I think, to hiring managers as recruiters, this is why this person's really good. This is why you need to have an open mind. Sometimes there's just no overcoming, certain biases, and in which case, it's on us as recruiters to work within the bounds that we're given. Kind of similar to, I think, how pen testers operate a lot of the time. Their first instinct is they want to break stuff and they want to do the cool things. They have scope to worry about. We have a scope to worry about, and especially us creative type recruiters, I think we want to, broaden the candidate pool as much as we possibly can, get people that are underlooked usually for any given role, and think outside the box. But at the end of the day, we do report to the hiring managers. And I think oftentimes as recruiters, we're good scapegoats, because we're the person that people talk to. So I'm sure that's happened to you before.
I mean, the finger gets pointed every which way, but if an executive's looking at some recruitment dashboard or report and not liking, some results, they're probably not going to ask the hiring manager what's going on. They're going to ask the recruiter, and it's okay. It's just part of the job. We deal with it. But it's an interesting challenge. And another thing to think about is like, I think a good recruiter will just go deeper on some other issues. Like, for example, I don't think I think the recruitment industry in general, and the process, why it's broken, is it's just a mechanical wheel. Okay, we post the job, and we go through the motions and we're not really thinking critically. So for example, like a question I ask some of my managers, and I stay pretty close to the HR business partners because they're really involved in people culture and some of the good and the bad that's happening across the company, is, hey, like, tell me about the challenges on your team, whether it's technical, delivery, or culture wise, and what are some good things that are happening. And in fact, like this is months ago, manager was having some difficulty with the team. They weren't working well. There was some combative conversations happening, some contention. This wasn't a good spot. So like one of his criteria on hiring somebody is he's like, I need someone who's very positive, very team oriented, that has leadership, that can kind of like elevate the team's kind of attitude. And so that if I hadn't advanced that, I wouldn't have been screening for that. I would have been looking for someone with those type of attributes. So it goes far beyond, like, good hiring goes far beyond technical skills. Because even if someone's missing some things, cyber people are smart. They can pick up. I mean, I hired someone that picked up a coding language in 2 weeks. Didn't know it before. We have a platform based on this language. It was new to them. No big deal. They had the ability to learn it. And then they were very successful. But it goes far beyond that. And so some of those other kind of hidden kind of attributes and different things happening on a team, can play a big part in hiring. And every manager, again, is going to have a different answer to that. Some are more practical, some are, more thoughtful. And it's really important as well to ask what's working on your team, what's not. Why are some people successful? Why are some people not successful? Have we succeeded in the last few hires we've made? Why is that not true? And then that can kind of drive a really effective kind of evolutionary process that is successful. But hiring's hard. It's never that easy. We're never going to, wave a magic wand at this and make it all work. But, I think a good recruiter is going to have the sense to have those deeper conversations.
Yeah, and you bring up kind of an interesting point. I guess the way I would put it is, and I talked to somebody else about this recently, recruiting's half science, half art. The science part is knowing the right questions to ask every time. The art part of it is being able to adjust on the fly and, based on the response to a question, ask a follow-up question and stuff like that. Is there anything you can think of to be able to kind of develop that art portion to get better at that part of recruiting or hiring, for that matter, for the hiring managers out there?
I think it comes with time. Like I reflect a lot on my past experience as a recruiter and all the mistakes I made, all the challenges I had. And I think just once you have more at bats and you're getting more looks at different situations, that just matures who you are and kind of helps you progress. But one thing is I talk to recruiters just like we're doing now, like not maybe all the time in like a podcast format or more formally, but I'm constantly asking, I have some coffee chats or some messages back and forth, or even on my team, what's working, what's not. We shadow each other as well at Dragos, or we did more so in the past, to kind of get a feel for, how do you approach this situation or this call? And there's a kind of constant back and forth, because we can, depending on the team you're on and who you are, I think we can get siloed in recruiting and do things a certain way and not think about some other ways, because I'm often surprised at what's working for other recruiters, or, how they handle different situations. And in fact, I had one last week. I had a weird thing come up, asked my coworker, hey, like, this is what I think should happen. Have you seen this before? And actually had some really good thoughts that helped guide kind of a solution to an issue. So I think always having an open mind, and to your point, just being adaptable, being flexible, that's like the art. Like you just get this sixth sense of, is this candidate going to work out? Is this situation okay? Is it not? And I think recruiters are in some ways kind of we're all born with that. That's why we're here, is we have that intuition. But I think it is a skill that gets developed over time. You just kind of know if something's going right or going wrong. So yeah, but that's what makes the job fun, right? Is it's not just black and white. It's not science completely. It's it's a lot of fluidity, a lot of art to it.
Yeah, sometimes I think there's a tension between the process part of recruiting and the art part of recruiting. I when I first started my career in recruiting, I worked for a huge corporate staffing firm, and we were taught kind of the old way of doing recruiting, which was metrics, 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 KPIs,
Yes.
KPIs. Daily stand-ups, hit your numbers. You got to make so many outbound calls a day, talk to so many people.
Yeah.
And then when I came into the security field and basically had to teach myself security, and I went internal with a consulting firm, I had to figure it all out from scratch because the same tactics weren't going to work. Security people aren't generally on job boards, so I couldn't just go to Career Builder and call 50 people a day.
Yeah.
Discovered that it's more about relationships. It's more about research, understanding the roles that you're working on. Lower volume, higher quality, better sort of white glove service. I think that tends to work in security. And I think a lot of the ghosting that happens is because recruiters are being incentivized to make placements and not to get back to people, and that's damaging companies' employer brands. But I think a lot of that comes out of the old school way of recruiting, which is hit your numbers. We're not going to worry about the ones that don't directly contribute to a placement today.
And again, like you're pointing out another, like, what makes a top tier recruiter. It's thinking beyond the placement 100%. Like, so Dragos is actually really good at this. Like, I'm not perfect at it, but we do get stuck in process and, let's get that offer out. Let's move on. But we're not thinking a step ahead. So here we call it always build the bench. That's what we say. Always build the bench. So even if like every resume I screen, I'm like, okay, like if I reject this person, that's fine. They're not a fit for this role. Let's get them an email. But if are they a fit for something else? Okay, let's put them in this bucket. Let me put them on a list for another position. Boom, we're building pipeline there. But then as we interview, as we go through the interview process, as we move forward or not move forward with somebody, I'm constantly trying to remind myself, like, could this person fit a future role, or do I know of another opportunity outside of Dragos that they could possibly be connected with? And again, that's like a lot of mental energy is being put into those situations. But again, that's I think a part of being a successful recruiter or having a successful recruiting program is thinking beyond just the immediate hire. Because again, Dragos is really good at this. I placed a position in Australia like 2 months ago. We had a really strong second place, person. They're on my short list next time we hire. Like we'd love to bring them on board. It was just small differences that made the other person stand out. And we plan to keep in touch. There was good follow-up. I think this person plans to network with, the rest of the team there. And so things like that, I think, again, that's why recruiters avoid it, is it's work. And they are measured against certain results. So they're going to put their energy there. But man, if we could beat on that drum a little more, I think we would change a lot in this industry.
For sure. And I'm noticing kind of a worrying trend where it's not just recruiters. It'll sometimes be hiring managers. If they post a job on LinkedIn, they'll say, we get a lot of applications for this role, so don't expect a response at all.
Yeah, it's just the expectation. It's like, it's tough. It's tough. And I think, look, like I think I posted about this a couple of days ago. Like, why is there, why is there a bad process? What are some reasons for that? And there's a lot of reasons. Like, people want to blame something on something. It's bad recruiters. No one cares. It's like, it could be a busy manager that can or won't spend the time on stuff. It could be an under-resourced team. Like I'm not saying that about Dragos, but at times we've been running a full desk on a really thin team, and it gets to be a lot. And so you forget to reach out, you forget to follow up, you just, things aren't perfect. The interview process is broken. We can't spend time on fixing it. Who's meeting with who? What's our criteria? What questions are we asking? Like, it just takes a lot of that talent acquisition management side. TA managers, should get a pat on the back because they're the ones that drive a lot of that strategy and process. and good ones can make a huge impact. Or the company just, they're not working well with HR, with the talent acquisition team. That could be another reason, right? To where there's, we know the answer, we know what needs to be done, but there's some sort of conflict or roadblock. So it's all a big messy web. It's and I think sadly on the part of the candidates, they just they don't see behind the curtain. And so they have this perception of, and I've been doing some more coaching calls, so I'm hearing this firsthand, like they just think there's something happening. It must be this, it must be that. It's like, well, could be, it might be, but here's some other perspective. And that makes for a very messy kind of conversation and process within the job search community. It really does. And I think we see a ton of that on LinkedIn as well, kind of that dialogue.
Yeah, so, and you tend to get kind of a negative echo chamber, I think, on LinkedIn, where somebody's struggling to find a job, everybody else echoes that, says, oh yeah, I'm in trouble too. I, applied
same thing
in positions, and that'll taint the mindset of the job seekers and a lot of them at once in a large way, and that's going to harm their future job prospects. I'm certainly empathetic to that. I've been through that myself. So is my wife. Yeah. So I get it. But I always tell people, be as positive as you can. Come across to hiring managers as a problem solver, not a problem creator. That's a big thing, and keep them positive and show them that you can work with people. Yeah, you'd mentioned before a common problem we're seeing right now, especially for the recruiters that post jobs and get all the applicants. You have thousands of applicants to a job sometimes. And so I think when that happens, that sheer volume, there's more ghosting that goes on just because recruiters struggle to sort through all the volume of that. Or in worst case scenario, it's actually a hiring manager managing that job posting, and they're not trained to look at a resume in 5 seconds to the next one. So, like I said, I think a lot of this ghosting happens because of sheer volume. Any tips to the, hiring managers out there, recruiters out there, just show them, I guess, the value of upholding your employer brand by getting back to people, and a way to do it efficiently to where they're not sinking dozens of hours into getting back to people that aren't fits.
Yeah, I think we've created a ton of goodwill at Dragos for that reason. Again, I'm not going to say we're perfect. We've messed up. We will mess up in the future, but we're very cognizant about getting back to people, having an efficient process, all of that. But the benefits we've seen from treating candidates well is they come back to apply again. Because if candidates get burned once, they may never apply again. And you don't want that. You want repeat applicants in my book. If people that want to work here, we want to hire people that want to be here. So having someone apply again, if they're applying to the right jobs, is a good thing. And then, your brand and your goodwill is just like a shining light to the community, and people are going to see that. And so again, Dragos has kind of built a reputation of, oh, hey, you get back to people, you have a good interview process. And we even see it as we close out with candidates. I've closed, 4 or 5 offers today we're getting done, and we're trying to get back to people that weren't selected. They say, you know what? It's weird to say, but I feel so good. I'm so happy you filled it, but I feel so good because you guys got back to us. You were touching base every week, etc. But as far as the big volume goes, number one, I think the most obvious thing is know exactly what you're looking for. So writing a good job description, and the recruiter and the manager being married to that and understanding each other, I think is number one. Because sadly, recruiters need to improve that aspect. They sometimes they don't even know what they're looking for. They're just like, oh, they need I'm looking for a CISSP and a degree and this job title. And they just get stuck in these keyword vacuums. It's there's more to it than that. Okay. You gotta sync up. You gotta be aligned to what you're looking for. The ATS and the systems and the process you have in place are also super important. Some are better than others. Some aren't better than others. So the way you set up that candidate workflow and candidate life cycle is very important. How are people coming in and applying? Are you making it easy for them? Is it difficult for them? Do you have questionnaires built in? Do you have a good application process? All of that. And then really a lot of that, like, sadly, a lot of like the screening of resumes and process and kind of falls on the recruiter. You just have to own it. You got to get through it. Like it's the grunt work of the job. We have a lot of, you're reaching out to people, your network is, coming into play, referrals, applicants, LinkedIn messages. You have all this stuff. Like you just have to stay organized and keep moving forward. Right. And it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to get back to everyone with a really, perfect message, but I think everyone deserves some answer. And what we've done at Dragos as well, again, I think we're looking to revamp this soon, but like the rejection messages that go out to people, or again, that the candidate life cycle, when they come in, when they leave, what message do they get? What experience do they have? Like we're trying to improve that. It's not just, oh, thanks for applying, see you later. There's more of a genuine feel to our messaging. There's resources attached. There's sort of more to the picture there. But it's hard right now. We've been dealing with the volume of candidates and it's not easy.
Yeah. And I would imagine, so I'm asking you about your ATS. I don't know what you use, but I would imagine there's some sort of workflow or functionality where you can one-click email reject somebody. Isn't that the case in yours and probably every ATS out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think ours is a couple clicks, it's not as easy. And I think we try to, put people in buckets and make it all organized and nice. But yeah, I mean, and again, like recruiters have limited time. We unfortunately can't get through everything perfectly. Like if it was a perfect world, everyone would get the time and attention they deserve and whatnot, but it's not the reality. So, but yeah, I think that the tools you use, the processes, how you're aligned to the business are all pretty important.
Yeah. And to the hiring managers out there, I would say, stay close to your recruiters, understand their process, understand what workflows they're going through. You should know, I would say as a hiring manager, if you're getting 1,000 applicants for a job, you need to be close enough to the recruiter to say, hey, that's a lot of applicants. I want to make sure you're not sorting out and filtering somebody out to be a fit, and that you're also getting back to everybody. Do we have that functionality in our ATS? What's your process for this? Do you have templates set up, stuff like that? And sometimes it can be difficult to get that involved with talent acquisition when you're so busy trying to do, the primary part of your job. But it's like I always say, you spend a little bit of time on the front end, you'll save a lot of time on the back end. You invest that time up front. You're not going to be interviewing as many people that aren't fits. You'll feel confident that recruiters aren't screening out people that could be fits. There's been a bunch of times I've worked with clients where I'll talk to somebody about the job. They say that they've already talked to the internal recruiter and they were rejected. And I just don't understand why.
You're like, what happened? Yeah. Like, where did that go wrong? Yeah.
So I think sometimes that happens, especially with generalist recruiters that don't specialize because they don't understand the terminology and stuff like that on a deep enough level. Any other tips you could think of for hiring managers out there that are struggling to hire?
Yeah, I mean, go be active online. Like, and you don't. This is very simple, but build your brand, network. Like, put your name out there. I'm shocked at how many few of people leverage specifically like LinkedIn to do outreach, to do those type of things. I'm not saying a manager has to become a recruiter and go out there and do keyword searches and source people. But hey, like, don't be invisible. Go out there, join groups, join communities, post content. It doesn't have to be something crazy. But there's major advantages to having, a personal brand or whatever you want to call it, a place online to where people know who you are. They know what you do, and they know where you work, and they know what you're hiring for. Like that's awesome. And I think right now you got to be careful because, if you hit click and post about a job you're hiring for, you're probably going to get inundated. And that's where, if managers aren't experienced, they're not going to know how to deal with all of that either. They're not trained and, oh geez, I got all this attention. How do I deal with this? And that's again, creating another cycle of, I reached out to you, you never got back to me. And those poor managers are like, I got 300 messages. Like, I'm not sure what to do. So yeah, just being laser focused on process, stay close to your recruiter, understand what you want. Those type of things are important, and just keep an open mind. Like, you'd be shocked at how much talent's out there that might be missing a few criteria, but other than that, if you can find someone that's trainable, and that's another pain point when we talk about talent gap, when we talk about all these issues, managers are very scared of the time commitment to train somebody. Like, we have the saying, I need someone that can hit the ground running on day one. And that's sort of a funny regurgitated phrase we hear thrown around. I need someone that just knows. So, and honestly, what's the ideal candidate for a manager? Someone who's done the same job somewhere else. Sadly, well, not sadly, that's just the reality. Like, I'm hiring someone for a chef at Burger King. If you've worked at a fast food restaurant doing the same thing, that's an easy fit. You just know what to do. You've been in the environment. You know all the equipment we use, yada, yada. That's a silly example, but you understand what I mean. Like, and so that's another challenge. Again, cultural challenge is just getting managers to say, hey, and Dragos is a good example of this. We've loosened up. We've never required degrees or certifications. Most people we hire certainly have those, and they have great credentials, and we're not against them at all. We're not anti-education. I mean, our own CEO is a SANS instructor. I mean, he believes in it. But the point of that was we wanted it to make it about what people could do, not what they had on a piece of paper. And that has done a lot for us, because our interviews are now, we're not thinking in the, oh, you don't have a degree. We're thinking like, who is this person? What do they bring? What skills do they have? What can they actually do? Because just because someone has the credentials doesn't mean they can do the job effectively either. And we live in a world now, it's so crazy. You can learn anything online. Just Google, YouTube it, or there's a ton of resources out there for people to learn. And so we've tried to recognize that and hire people that have the skills, no matter how they achieved those skills. We'll take them. So
yeah, I think a major challenge in hiring and screening people basically is people are using proxies for ability that may not necessarily be the right thing that they're trying to measure. Like, often they'll look for certs, or they'll look for degrees, or they'll look for years of experience doing X, Y, and Z thing. There's been so many times throughout my career, I've recommended a candidate that on paper did not have the years of experience, but I knew by talking to them how bright they were, and they could probably make more of an impact on day one that somebody had been doing than somebody who'd been doing that same job twice as long. So yeah, that's that art piece again,
Yeah.
Have you ever, can you think of a situation where you had recommended somebody like that, got the hiring manager to stay, keep an open mind, and that person ended up being like a really good employee?
Yeah. I've made so many hires. I'm trying to think. I've never had, I'll say it specifically at this company, I've never had to convince a manager of much. Like, we actually have such a good culture that it's more like, not convincing them to take the call, but like, having the manager have the kind of the leap of faith to continue in the process with that candidate. I'm trying to think of an example of when that has specifically happened. Because I had a name in mind. Oh yeah, for sure. So our Intel team had a unique position open, and just recently, and there's a candidate I've been in touch with for probably my entire time at Dragos. We connected shortly after I came here. Very impressive person. Like, she doesn't have a ton of work history that's relevant. She doesn't have kind of the pedigree or the resume to back it up, but she's extremely ambitious. And I was shocked at how much she knew about ICS security, malware, threat intel, all these relevant things. She had just been very and she just presents well. She's got the energy, all of that. So interviewed for a position, came in second place. Didn't get there. Interviewed again, didn't get it, but the manager was very, very impressed. Wow, and here's the feedback. And so that's someone that's at top of mind all the time for our Intel team. And I told her just a few weeks ago, like, hey, my mission is to get you here. I just don't know what that's going to look like, but let's keep doing that. So, while she just didn't have, again, it's a small team. They needed someone who had XYZ skills that could in many ways come in and make impact. There was just too much training to be done. That's someone that we're keeping a very close eye on. In fact, she's networked her way enough into the company. One of our principal analysts is now like her mentor. There's good mojo happening there. So it's just a matter of when, not if, we get this person. And we've just had that relationship. But again, I'm kind of pulling on a different string, like keeping in touch with candidates that failed and then came back. Like I hired someone that, gosh, I think he interviewed for 2 or 3 positions and we finally got him. Something finally worked. Like on the first situation, an internal got it. Second situation, was second place. And then finally, boom, like the magic happened. We got him in. So, we try to, again, keep that bench warm, keep people involved, have an open mind. But yeah, it's haven't quite landed that magic hire where there was a cool story behind it. But this particular candidate for Intel, I won't tell you the name, but fantastic person that just is a little junior, but we're keeping a close eye on that to see if there's something that'll fit in the future. So
yeah, it's still a great story, and I think it really highlights the importance of having a long-term focus in recruiting and hiring versus having that short-term transactional focus, which can be so easy to fall into as recruiters, especially as an external recruiter. My livelihood is contingent on every placement that I make. So
seriously,
it's all very much, top of mind when it comes to getting paid. But at the end of the day, you have to love what you do and care about the people you work with. I had a situation where this was one of my favorite clients. They always kind of have the mindset of, we'll talk to anybody at any point. We're essentially always hiring, even though we're not hiring, but we're always interviewing. So
cool.
I had a guy that interviewed with them a couple of years ago, and then he was hired last year. It was at least a year since he had first interviewed, and he had just one more quick call, and they hired him on the spot because they happened to have
That's awesome. Yeah.
the open need, and they had identified somebody way before they had the opening that they knew was a great fit for the firm, and it just
That's
all
great.
going to work out. So yeah, that long-term focus is a great way to go about it. And I really can't stress enough how important it is to actually to care about the people going through the process. That's so much of candidate experience, is not just thinking of people number and actually hearing them when they're talking about their challenges and why they're looking for a new move. So I spend a lot of my time. It's a core focus for our firm to focus on motivators for making a move. I talk to people more about those than I do about their technical usually. Because
the why. So that brings up another point. You asked earlier about like advice for hiring managers. Another thing I would say is don't fall asleep when you're not actively hiring. So to that company's credit, like they were out there looking, they were having conversations, being transparent. Like, I don't have a job open, but we are interested in meeting people that could fit us in the future. Like, good recruiters, they can go find people and bring them in and have those conversations. I talked to a recruiter, a friend of mine, I think it was a week or 2 ago. And while a lot of her technical positions aren't necessarily open because it's just been that kind of year, she was showing me messages she was putting out to people for positions that certainly the team would probably fill next year. And so if you can already have this like warm little bundle of candidates that match the culture, that have the skills, that have met some people, again, not that you're just going to hire them after one call necessarily all the time. You're going to go through a process, but not starting dead cold when you open a job. I think having some momentum even before you hit post is a huge deal. So that's a really good story as well. I like that.
Yeah. Some folks, though, I think you have to be careful about the whole pipelining thing, because some folks will say, somebody reached out to me. I could tell they didn't actually have a job. They were just talking to me to talk to me.
I don't want to waste my time. Yeah.
I don't know if they were harvesting resumes or gathering salary data or what. So I would think when it comes to that sort of thing, it's big about you need to set expectations and be transparent.
Exactly.
We don't have the exact open role right now. But again, keeping an open mind, both as a candidate and as a hiring team.
Yeah.
Super important.
100%. I agree with that.
Well, we're coming up on time here. So, Josh,
Cool.
just one last question for you.
Yeah, of course.
What are we not talking about in the field, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
So I would say like specific to cybersecurity or recruiting or anything like that.
Security, ideally, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. So mine would be education. Like we have to allow candidates to go build skills how they are able to. So like, again, back to like degree requirements, certification requirements, like companies are still have both feet cemented into these traditions of they have to have these credentials, they have to have these things. But, I always make the comment like the hackers out there, they're figuring things out on their own. Why aren't we allowing that same privilege to people that are working on our side, that are the good guys, the ethical hackers? So I would say we need to start screening for what people can do, not what they have achieved in the education world. And I'm not bashing against boot camps or certs or degrees. Like that's probably still the route we should go. Like those are great opportunities. But, I've seen very ambitious people build very impressive skills and portfolios just on their own because they were that good and they were that ambitious about it. So we talk about diversity, we talk about problems with hiring, but we're not willing to give anything on our side as employers. I think we need to break that down. And I think that'll make a big difference. We'll see if that ever happens, but just some thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, more of these podcasts. Hopefully, we're gonna make an impact.
Yeah,
as we had discussed before.
For sure.
It's really all about open-minded hiring and looking for people that have, as cliche as it is, passion, but intellectual curiosity, strong motivators that want to do great things in the field and have a genuine interest. If we focus more on, I think, some of those intangibles, sometimes we'll have more success in hiring for long term. Well, that's a great place to wrap up. Josh, appreciate your time. If people want to find you online, what's the best way to do so?
So my website's joshfulmer.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter as well, @FulmDog. Everything's on my LinkedIn profile if you'd like to, or my website if you'd like to connect with me there. So look forward to meeting anyone that reaches out.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Josh. Thanks, everybody.